This is eCoffee with Experts, where marketers and founders share what's actually working in SEO, AI, and digital growth. Grab your coffee and fuel your mind as we chat with top minds about their wins, struggles, and lessons you won't find in a blog post. Brought to you by Digital Web Solutions, we bring real talk to help you grow your business, one episode at a time. Let's get started.
Omer Nisar, welcome to eCoffee with Experts. I'm glad to have you.
I'm happy to be here.
We tried to connect a couple, months ago when, when we were going to have a dinner in New York, and it never worked out. You were at Amazon at that time, but you've shifted gears, and now you are the VP of Biddable Media at Known. Tell me a little bit about Known and what your role is.
Sure. So Known is an independent agency. It's been in the press a lot recently, for its tools and tech and its data and, a great CEO and great chief media officer. Obviously, I have to say that since they give me my paycheck as far as a great chief media officer. But seriously, it's some of the best people I've worked with, very smart. It's independent. It crosses, creative, strategy, and media. And my role really sits within the media organization. I cover all the biddable channels. So that'd be paid search, paid social, and programmatic. And obviously the little tangents that come across from there. And, there's a little overlap and there's a little, debate here and there. But that's generally what my role there is, and making sure that we're set up for success and our clients are set up for success. And I think that's one thing that really makes Known stand out is we don't do a lot of kind of promotional or kind of like backhanded back office dealings. We are very focused on client success to the point where we will even say like, we guarantee you and we'll keep our bonus away until we hit what you need to do. So it's very different. No principle-based buying, nothing of that sort, no arbitrage. We are who we are. We're very transparent. And I think that's been really refreshing.
Yeah. That's like a unique selling proposition or a unique value proposition when it comes to agencies who are notorious for, some of the more unskilled agencies will guarantee something, but usually there's no guarantees in marketing. So that's huge, coming from a business.
Yeah, for sure. Like I've worked at 3 of the big holdcos, and it's been interesting because it's a tough market. It's challenging. You're beholden to shareholders and driving profits. But at the same time, competition is really high. So you've had to negotiate scopes down. And so less and less teams, but more and more work. So you have to find new ways of revenue. But what's been refreshing is, we say, this is who we are. This is a team that's needed. This is a team that's going to be on your account. And, we will help you get to your marketing goals. What will make you successful? What will make you happy? And that's where part of our success comes in. We might not be totally the cheapest, but we're probably the best.
Yeah, I like that. And that's what most people are looking for anyway. They're like, okay, I know I might be saving money because it's cheap, but what is the real cost to that? I would rather just pay it and actually get what I want. So you've led initiatives for big global agencies and also your own ventures. I'm curious, what is like one foundational kind of principle that's remained true no matter the business size or the industry?
Yeah, I think this is great because, I just taught a digital marketing class for BrainStation. And the first thing I always say is clarity. You need clarity from the very beginning. So I think one of the interesting things is that you always get asked, and clients have asked from big Fortune 500 companies, like, what should our budget be? Well, you tell me what your budget is. If you go to Google and Meta, they will tell you infinite. You can spend infinite, and you really can't. So I think clarity in your purpose, in your goal, and what you have at hand and what you can do is number one. And that extends to everyone from the large agencies, large clients, to even, smaller brands like my own, like knowing full well what I can achieve and what my tolerance is and what I'm trying to achieve. It's your first and foremost kind of, vision and goal.
You said something about tolerance there, and I wonder if you can expand on that.
Yeah, tolerance is important because, it's understanding if once you have that clarity of like what you're trying to achieve, you have to understand what's your make or break point, right? So like if I think about like a small brand like myself, like my passion project Between Spaces, I read this book called 12 Months to a Million, and it gave me this idea. And it was around like a very formative year of my life. I was going through a divorce. I had just been part of a reduction in force. And then, all of a sudden out of nowhere, my father passed away. Just completely in his sleep. And so like, I was kind of like, oh my God, this is crazy. And so I felt like I needed something of my own. And at the same time, I started reading this book, and it was just, it was very clear, like, don't try to bite off more than you can chew. Start with one product and know that you're not going to hit $1 million, tons of revenue there. But what you're going to do is most likely you're going to have a mistake, and you're going to iterate on top of that and then slowly add more stuff. Now, I'm sure the book has its flaws and it might be a little bit more ambitious, and it's not as easy as it says, but like it resonated with me because it's, as someone who's done performance marketing, you want to test and learn your way and understand what works, what doesn't, and knowing full well what is success and what success looks like in the long term as opposed to the short term is really important.
I was just on it was an onboarding call for our community and talking with an agency owner, and I said, "What's your target in the next 3 years?" And he was like, "Oh my gosh, I haven't even thought that far. Like
Mhm.
what could that be?" And as we got to talking about it, I was like, really the challenge that I've seen for most agency owners and entrepreneurs is I ask the question, "Can you 10x your business?" And a lot of the times
Mhm.
they'll be like, "Oh man, I don't know. That's going to be really hard in the next couple years." I'm like, "Okay, well, I didn't put any parameters around that.
Mhm.
What if I said, can you 10x your business in the next 25 years? How
Yeah.
would that change your thinking?" And I think to your point, like that tolerance window, what a lot of folks are missing out on right now, especially the adoption of AI, is like
Mhm.
they think they have to revolutionize their
Yeah.
business all at once. It's like step by step in building.
Yeah, and everything is, with AI, it's such a catchword. Is like it's testing and learning, right? And it goes every which way, every direction. Like, so if I again think about a small company, it's AI is great. It's revolutionized the ability to do multiple things with a very small workforce. But I would say it doesn't match what humans do. So, like again, if I use between spaces, for example, a lot of my ads, a lot of my work has been utilizing AI. It's like a one-person shop with two advisors, one being my sister and the other being my girlfriend. But it still comes down to like one person on a keyboard, and the market is saturated with, subscription services that we can do this and we can do that. And a lot of it has been testing and learning. It's been great, but it doesn't replace a whole creative shop or a whole creative studio. And knowing
Yeah.
that I don't have those resources just yet is important. Now you expand that and take it to like a much larger level to a brand. They're very curious about AI, but you also still have the need at that level to protect your brand, to build upon what exists. If I take someone like Coca-Cola, they're not just going to go on to Mid-Journey and Gemini. They might, experiment with it, but you still need, your brand guidelines and brand parameters. And, sadly, as far as creative goes, you still can tell something's AI generated versus like human curated.
Yeah.
And so with that, it's also going back to the point of, the tolerance of what you want to do. There's definitely a learning aspect of it right now, but it's different, different strokes for different folks at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a perfect example. You are a unique individual in a position where you've worked at global companies that are publicly traded, you've worked at private companies like Known, which you're at now, but still have a big reach. And then you have your own project, which is a D2C brand between spaces. I'm curious what you've brought from those bigger players that have
Mm.
worked and how you're applying it to your own brand in terms of marketing, getting early traction and getting out to the
Yeah.
market.
So interestingly enough, I think the one thing, originally when I started marketing, it was because I didn't want to deal with numbers, right? I went and I remember I was at Sony Music, the business and legal department, and I was like, I don't deal with numbers and legalese. I just want to be creative. And I went and got an MBA in marketing. And then I realized, man, there's a lot of numbers involved here. It is like
Yeah.
it's the false sense of marketing, especially nowadays, where brand marketing seems to be fading and everyone just wants to be a performance marketer and just feels like you could just dump a whole bunch of money in, Meta and Google and generate a lot of revenue. And that's really not the case. So what I would say I've taken is this understanding and learning. And I think it goes all the way back to really my time at Equinox, where, Equinox luxury gym,
Mm-hmm.
fitness brand, they would hate me for calling them gym. You know, I have a funny anecdote about that with the CEO, which I can say later, where they are very much about their brand. It's beautiful visuals, and they notoriously used to Photoshop their models to be even thinner than they were, and they're already pretty thin. But it operated like a performance shop. It was like, how many leads did we get? How many sales do we have on a daily, weekly, monthly basis? And from that, I took a rigor of like, what is driving business outcomes? And
Mm-hmm.
so that where metrics, measurement, analytics became really important. And so I've taken that to every level. Like, what am I doing that is driving the business forward? Now, I want to be very clear. Like, I am someone who's a performance marketer and has been, but I'm very clear at this moment that brand marketing needs to exist and needs to exist more than it does, because we're in a world where the brand is what's lacking. And that's your key differentiator right now. Everyone can kind of, do search ads and paid Meta and Instagram ads to the bottom. But what sets you apart is what's your brand purpose. And so I think if you're talking about efficiency, I think what we've lacked is, this drive to be growth hackers and growth marketers is the brand and branding. Again, what I would take to every place is metrics, attribution, being clear, what we're trying to achieve and how we get there and what are the numbers that matter. Is it ROAS? Is it actually, your contribution margin? What is your payback? So again, go back to between spaces. I didn't launch with 5, 6 different products. I launched with one thing. And in my mind, I had, this is how much it's cost me to get there. So this is how many things I need to sell in order to break even. And this is how many things I need to sell. And so from there, I drove what my advertising budget could be. Part of it was like, sure, it was like the cost of doing business. Like, I am starting something new. Let's see how this goes. I'll write it off in taxes, whatnot. But like, I also wasn't like blessed with like Elon Musk money. And I'm just like, yeah, I'm just going to start a rocket. So, it's like, it's one of those things like knowing full well, having clear goals and being able to track that is, I think, something that I've learned. And I think is really applicable on every level. And it doesn't necessarily just mean, being a performance growth hacker.
Yeah. Entrepreneurship is not like, once you get into it, it's not that sexy. Like it's numbers, it's crunching the math. It's like, sweat equity. It's not all the Instagram makes it up to be. But the reason I asked you that is because the barrier to entry into becoming an entrepreneur is much lower and dropping even further with AI. Right. We have all these sort of design platforms. Now we have, like you mentioned, like Midjourney, we have all kinds of stuff, and it's easy to get into the market. But I think the fundamentals of what will make a business successful in 1, 3, 5+ years does come down to, counting the beans, man.
Yeah. I think the one person who thinks it's sexy is my 10-year-old son. He is so fascinated that I own my own business. I'm like, wait till you find out you're the logistics partner who's going to be packing these boxes to mail them.
The logistics partner. That's awesome.
But I think he's the only one. But like, it's work, right? But after he goes to bed, I'm sitting there researching, doing things, and the barrier to entry. That's a great point you bring up. I can think back to like my first computer was in 95. 95? Yeah, it was in London. My dad agreed to buy it for me if I made a website for his airline, which was, well, he didn't own the airline, but he worked for it. It was Pakistan International Airlines. And so that's when I started learning HTML. And I used to make HTML websites. And fast forward to college, NYU, I taught myself how to do Flash, making Flash websites. And there was WordPress. And, so I'd been in this kind of developmental thing. I taught myself how to code on iOS, that first SDK that Steve Jobs announced in like 2000, and, was able to make iPhone apps, or at least pitched the idea to Universal Music to make their first bunch of iPhone apps. So I've always been it. But like for Between Spaces, the ability for one person to graphic design and set up a shop via Shopify and do your, CRM, it's just so much, like almost like one click. And there's almost like the barrier to entry, to your point, is so low that why wouldn't you do it? Because then it's also something to, again, as someone in that formative years of mine who lost so much, was just like, wow, this is something of my own. No matter if it fails or succeeds, at least I tried. And it's almost like a shame if I don't try to do this.
Yeah, I hear that. With all these one-click apps and the ease to go to market and to test things, you were kind of alluding to it with Known that, maybe we even would guarantee performance. That creates, we talk about the moat, like a moat in a brand, a moat in the business, like what keeps the competitors out? What makes you different? What's your unique value proposition? How are you thinking about building a moat in terms of brand equity? Like, is there something that's a deep, deep seed?
I mean, I think it varies for everyone. So like, again, using Between Spaces, I think I started with the brand, not the products. Like generally a lot of things are commoditized, right? Like I won't say iPhone's commoditized, but like you have Android, right? At the end of the day, it's a glass slab, which you can touch, right? Windows tried it. But what sets it apart is this kind of halo feeling of Apple. And for me, like, when I started Between Spaces, for me, there was a few things. One, internally and versus externally, is something of my own. It was important for me to try. But externally, it was like, I wanted to acknowledge, and the reason why I came up with the word Between Spaces was that, when I was, lost my job, was going through a divorce, and my father passed away, I felt like really low. And like, as if like, I had the word like redundant and tattooed on my head, or, failure. And it was this moment of realization, like, at any given moment, we're all going through so many things. And that's not really what, it's not really what kind of brings us down. It's actually in those moments of transition that we actually build ourselves up, and what makes us. So in the moment, it seems really bad, but we're all between these spaces where we're actually getting better and, evolving. So it was the message for me, and the message is the brand. It became more important. And the second part of the brand was like, as someone who's from a Pakistani background, and has faced racism. And I say this, the day after Zoran Mamdani wins the New York City mayoralship.
Yeah.
Which actually made me emotional because I was someone who wanted to be in politics, and my parents were like, that's not going to happen for someone like you.
Wow.
it's like, Americans would never vote for, a Pakistani. But like, but for me, it was like, it's also important for people to realize, not only that Pakistan isn't just some place that that harbors terrorists in video games and movies, but it's actually has a lot of quality products. And so the goods, the clothes are all made there and high quality. And, a lot of things that people don't even know is that most of the world's soccer balls are made in Pakistan. So it was like, it was twofold. It was like, one is like, celebrate yourselves, but also I want to uplift and acknowledge, part of my culture
Mm-hmm.
and where I come from. And that's not just like, a stereotype or something to go back. And that goes back to my point. Like that is part of the brand story, it's the brand narrative. And that's what will ultimately set me apart, especially in this day and age where once again, we're talking about AI, where algorithms can, optimize to the lowest cost per conversion. This what really sets you apart is your creative and your brand. And without that, you're kind of seeing diminishing returns and just kind of like, there's no differentiation. There's one client, sorry to go on about this. There's one
Please.
client I worked with at an agency, which will go unnamed. And they found that the only time they had increased sales was during Prime Day. And they
Okay.
were a major brand and they did oral care. And they were really well known for it, but like they had gotten into this habit of like just doing performance marketing and discounting. And so there's a learned behavior amongst people that these things just go on sale. And then the second learned behavior was like there was no differentiation or distinction of the brand. So the brand didn't matter. All that mattered was the price. And we trained people into that thinking. So, they had to go back and invest in the brand, which is like in this day and age, it's a little bit more punishing because we become so used to like, I did this and within 7 days, it did this. Brands take a long time to build. It's a 3 months, 6 months, year-long process. It doesn't happen overnight. So once you cut off that pipeline of brand building, it's going to take a little time to get it back up.
Yeah. And I think going back to what you were saying is there's so much emotion in that story you shared. It's very personal.
Yeah.
It has a connection and it has an origin. I think that's something that a lot of people miss out on. What is the origin story? Like something Russell Brunson talks about it. He's like, there was something that happened where you transformed from the person you were into the person you have become since that moment. And like
Exactly.
that origin story is like that can be the moat for
Yeah.
brand and like
Absolutely.
identifying like other people who have experienced that same emotion and then like how do we express ourselves? What are the things in common that we have?
Yeah.
And then start to build like the actual numbers and more performance stuff around that. But
Yeah.
really it comes down to the emotion because that's what drives consumer behavior
For sure.
in the first place.
It's the connection. It's that feeling, right? When you put on Nike, you're saying something. When you put on
Yeah.
Apple headphones, you're kind of saying something, right? And I feel like, we have such great brands and, Instagram hits me and I buy a lot of stuff, unfortunately. So like having someone who's really into like fitness and, I see you're wearing a Whoop and same here. And it's almost like, what about this is connecting with me, right? Is it price point? Then I'll just go to Target or whatever, or do the Fabletics thing. Or is it like, is there some visual aspect, something that I want it to represent about me?
Yes, absolutely. Especially in D2C.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to understand like specifically who that person is. It's not
Yeah.
like you're talking with a department
Mhm.
for an enterprise, which maybe that's what you're doing at Known.
Yes.
I'm curious, what are some of the if we get into more of the technical like marketing aspects now and we're talking about programmatic and
Mhm.
biddable channels, right? Like what are some of the things that I would need to know as a person that's in marketing about biddable programs or like
Sure.
biddable channels
Yeah.
to win?
This is great because it's also just tied to stuff we talk about. I
Yeah.
think, if you think about biddable, it's like paid search, the stuff you see in search and ads on Instagram and then programmatic. And I think things are changing in a way that is somewhat worrying, but also exciting. And the reason why I say worrying is, on Google, you have something called PMAX. On Meta, you have something called Advantage, which basically are like black boxes and they just guarantee you results. You don't know where the ad's going, who's seeing it, nothing of that sort. It takes the control out of the human, right? Which is an uncomfortable place to be in because of not only because like if you want to recreate it, you don't really know what's going on, but also there is a certain amount of data that you get when you set up your own campaigns and set up your own
Yes.
kind of like structure. Like, okay, I have, I'm targeting this audience or I'm targeting this interest and actually this performed well. So maybe my products can pivot here further, or maybe, I need to have more products appealing to this demographic. But when you let the AI bots, not to make them sound like, Skynet, do it, you lack that transparency and that visual. But at the same time, it more often than not performs better. Not always. We've done tests where we've actually beat the AI, but this is the way the market is going. So that's a challenge. The second part of that is like what we really now control is the brand and the creative, because AI cannot do that. Advantage
Yeah.
Plus can't do that. PMAX can't necessarily do that. So those are, they can do variations based on things you upload, but you have to be cognizant of when that message is degrading, when there's too much frequency, too little frequency, we're paying too much. So that's one thing. Going back to what biddable and what's changing as well is, like, I would say programmatic is an area that is changing the most. I used to jokingly say when I was head of social back at Digitas that programmatic is problematic because of the fraud and visibility. And I say that knowing full well that there's visibility issues in social and Facebook, Instagram, but like Facebook and Instagram grade their own homework and they won't necessarily give you credit for any of it, right?
Mm.
Whereas, you can have some negotiation on the programmatic side. But what's exciting now is with the popularity of streaming and CTV and OTT, you can control a lot of that via programmatic. And it gives, again, going back to like accessibility, you have like the ability to be on Hulu and Disney Plus and possibly, other places where you can be self-service. That's something that didn't exist. So if you go to like a mom and pop shop, in Huntington, Long Island, where I live, and say like, hey, I can get you on, next to um, the Lowdown on Hulu or, Deli Boys, it's possible. And that's
Yeah.
amazing. Or like a Star Wars show, like that's crazy to think about, right? Like now, obviously they'll be like, well, the whole nation see it. Like, nah, it really depends on how much you bid and how much, but like you will get eyeballs. And
Yeah.
that's an amazing concept. For me, the ability that now we've come to a place where, what is considered the largest, brand building, high impact visual, aside from, like, say, cinema, is accessible to a lot of people is very exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. How, like, if I'm a smaller brand, small, mid market, whatever,
Mhm.
I know about social, I know about SEO. I'm working on those two things.
Mhm.
I have creative assets. I feel like I have a pretty strong brand. At what point do you feel like it's appropriate or a good strategy to go into programmatic? Is it like, is it
Yeah.
something that you add on top or is it a base layer?
I feel like it's all goes hand in hand. Programmatic notoriously is not as efficient as social. And I will say this, search would normally considered the best for conversion, but I actually feel really strongly about social,
Hmm.
especially since everyone talks about how they just buy stuff on Instagram. And I am someone who started performance social back in 2013 for AT&T, and it was like one of the first people doing it, and we got it to work really well. And now it's so much more sophisticated. The products are so much more sophisticated. So I will say, and maybe this is my bias as someone who's been heavily involved in paid social, to my detriment, that programmatic doesn't have that same kind of success. But what
Yeah.
it's really good at is like the open web and reaching you across. So again, I always
Mm.
tell everyone, and that you have to have that layer on, because sure, you will get conversions just, at the performance social level, but like programmatic, what it really does, and I can understand the hesitation because one thing is making images, but another thing is like making videos and like how does
Yeah.
one get their mind around that, right? And I can't tell you how many videos I came up with for Between Spaces that were shot down by my girlfriend and my sister because they were too hokey, which is
The creative direction team.
I was like, listen, I've got a weird sense of humor. They're like, yeah, but your brand isn't funny. I'm like, touche. This is right. This is right. My own brand that I made is not whimsical. So yeah, I think it's like that still has to be fine tuned. But I feel like, with Sora 2 and Gemini coming into the forefront, maybe that can become better.
How do you differentiate between organic social and paid social, particularly for a D2C brand, let's say, like Between Spaces?
Yeah. I think my biggest question, I have this question of everyone, and I ask this, is what is the value of organic social? And I don't mean that to be mean. It's just like, because Meta has basically made it so that no one sees your message
Yeah.
unless you put money behind it. And so it's like, on one hand, you're paying dollars to create this content. You may have like a social media team.
Hmm.
And then on top of it, you have to pay for people to see it. So again, if you're thinking about efficiency and performance, and if that's what your game is, why are you doing organic and not just investing the money in the performance aspect? Now, there's a huge portion of it that says it's about the brand. And I totally align with it. But like, is that money better spent? And like, I always think about next best dollar. Where is your next best dollar spent? Is this better spent on open web and getting people to know about your brand, or saving that money to make a nice, big, like impactful video? Or like, is it worth, hiring a social media manager to respond to comments and put up creative for National Pie Day or whatever day we're celebrating, right? It's challenging because like everyone's trained into that behavior now. Facebook/Meta did that old rug pull, like you need to have a page and it's free organic reach and earned reach. And everyone, I remember I was at Equinox, we spent so much money building a page up, and then they did like, actually, guess what? You got to advertise for people to see it. I'm like, okay. So, and the challenging there is, and I've had this conversation with multiple people who will go unnamed, is like, you can take the same money that you're going to do to boost your organic post and make like actually a campaign, which better targeting and shows you business outcomes. Because there is a difference putting money just behind a post and just making sure like people who follow your page see it versus, hey, I'm making a campaign out of this. I want to reach this audience, and it'll give you better insights. And so it's like, again, it's kind of like, what's the value? And some of it's just intrinsic and can't be measured, and it's brand building, and that's fine. But it goes back to, clarity of purpose and what your goals are and what your tolerance is.
Yeah, back to the top of the conversation, right?
Yeah.
With clarity and what you're trying to go after. That's really interesting because I recently, as in a couple days ago, just started posting on my YouTube channel. I do a lot of these podcasts, a lot of these interviews, started making YouTube shorts, but there's a strategy behind it.
Yeah.
Oh, it's not just, I'm just going to post because everybody says so, because Omer said like organic is fine if I don't put a lot of money behind it. Yeah, there's a strategy to it.
Yeah, for sure. And there's that earn. And again, to that point, it's like, to me, that makes a lot of sense because it's you, it's you're cultivating an audience and a brand, right? But if it's a small company, like unless you're clear about your brand and your vision, and you have that stream of content, it doesn't make sense for Between Spaces to jump on National Pie Day. Like that's not our voice or vision. It's also like becomes this like, you listen to the experts are like, oh, you should be posting 2-3 times a day and making TikToks. I could not imagine myself, a 46-year-old man on TikTok doing the dances to get clicks, right? Believe me, part of it's gone through my mind, and I've been asked like, what are you doing?
Yeah. Again, you have your creative team, which is your partner and your sister, being like, literal bro, what are you doing?
You are too old for this.
Yeah, man. Omer Nisar, where can we find more about you, about Between Spaces, Known, all of that? Where do you want us to go?
Sure. I mean, God, I'm on LinkedIn. Find me on /in/Omer Nisar, betweenspaces.co. And if you want to find me, and you can just Google Omi Nice. I used to have omernisar.com, but someone stole it. And so now it's omernisar.co. I know. It wasn't even Omer Nisar. The dude took it.
Unbelievable. Wow. Someone saw potential in you and bought into the stock early.
I'm going to SEO this one.
Yeah. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.